Sorry, I'm not home right now. I'm walking into spiderwebs, so leave a message and I'll call you back. This week we're talking about Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Essential Albums podcast where we discuss an album, place, and culture and whether or not it's worth your time. Of course, we get into a lot more than just that. To join myself, Ryan, Gordon, and Anise, reliving some of these old classics and diving into our new favorite album. So this is definitely an old classic.
Yeah, I mean, just singing the intro part of the song, I'm just like, do I finish out that like part of the chorus, a likely story, but leave a message and I'll call you back? Like, it's so catchy when you're in that part of that song.
I remember there was that one point when, like, well, maybe kids don't know, but do you guys remember when like cell phones were first happening? I remember that was my voicemail. Sorry, I'm not home right now. I'm walking into spiderweb. Leave a message.
That's awesome. I don't remember that, but that's awesome.
The song was probably like already, I don't know, 5 years old at that point, but
yeah, it's the whole thing too of like just actually leaving a voicemail. Like, people didn't even do it back then, and to do it now, it's like even more ridiculous.
I don't know who calls people now.
Totally.
So I guess it's a good segue to kick us off. What's your current relationship with No Doubt? This album came out over 25 years ago. So how are you guys listening to No Doubt now?
My current relationship. Well, Anise, you go.
I don't know. It seems like Gwen Stefani is everywhere now. Like, she's a bona fide celebrity on The Voice, and whoever she's dating is always news and everything. And she does her Vegas show, so she's still in the lexicon, and she's still very, 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 very popular. And these songs from this album are still very, 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 very popular, and they still get played. So it's just there. It's hard to avoid, no doubt, even today. These 25-year-old songs, I guess they're like we said, the album's a bona fide classic at this point. So these songs are just everywhere. Not
when you say like
not constantly being
Stefani's bigger though.
Oh well, bigger, yeah, but her biggest album is probably still this, her biggest work.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to like this being the biggest album, this is probably the biggest album that we've reviewed so far. I mean, it went diamond, and it's probably our biggest selling album that we've done. I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have anything that's gone diamond in our episodes.
Not that I can think of. Yeah.
What I'm saying though, like, has she grown beyond No Doubt? Like, is Gwen Stefani as a brand bigger than No Doubt?
Yeah, well now, yeah, because she has her Vegas show where it's Gwen Stefani, but she sings half these songs during the shows. I don't know if that's still going on, but it was a thing a couple of years ago, at least. So, yeah, she's the one who benefited the most out of this.
Yeah, I think, just to add on to that, I think she's grown beyond this. I think the band's kind of leaned into it as well, because I remember like seeing interviews about how there's a Spin magazine cover from 1996 that was kind of pretty popular within the band, or not popular, it's kind of infamous. But Spin was like, hey, we want to do a cover story on No Doubt, but they're like, we only want Gwen Stefani for the cover. Like, you guys can just more or less run her off.
And then they dramatized it in the Don't Speak music video.
Exactly. So, and then I think the other thing is too, I think they've really blurred the line as their music has progressed as a band. So like, for example, their newest album, which came out in 2012, there's a song on it called Push and Shove, and it's a major laser beat. So I'm like, without looking it up, there's no way I would have known if that was a Gwen Stefani song or a No Doubt song.
Yeah, the lines are blurred, but I don't know. For me, with this album, these songs I still try to listen to today. So my relationship is still these songs. I'm not really, I don't know. I guess Gwen Stefani released a new song more recently. Wasn't really anything I was really into, but yeah, as far as No Doubt goes, yeah, this album, songs from other albums I still listen to, but
this is the album for me that, like, when I think about No Doubt, this is the one. I don't think I really listened to any other No Doubt album. Sorry, No Doubt. Sure, they're great, but this was just the one that came out and was huge, and then all the singles, and it's like I almost didn't have a choice. I had to go through and listen to it, and I wasn't opposed to it, but I didn't actually seek it out. I think my sister had it.
Yeah, how about you? Is your relationship with them now? Is it just the Gwen Stefani stuff, or is it this album, or all of No Doubt, or?
Yeah, I would say in terms of No Doubt, I would say it's this album specifically. In terms of like if you throw no Gwen Stefani into that too, I think she's kind of in my mind she's kind of a separate entity because I was still following No Doubt their progression, and I think her first album came out in 2004. I know she had the other songs like with Moby and Eve leading up to that, and she was working as a solo artist, but like Hollaback Girl and stuff like that. That's Gwen Stefani. That's not No Doubt,
Right.
and that's kind of distinct in my mind. And then when I think of No Doubt, I think of probably more of their '90s stuff. So definitely this album, and then I think of the singles like on their albums that came out after, like Return to Saturn and whatever the third album was. I can't remember now.
I think the biggest thing for me, one of the reasons I wouldn't say fell off, because it's not like I didn't listen to No Doubt. Like I still like their songs. And by the time Return to Saturn came out, the album after Tragic Kingdom, it was the era of downloading had begun. And I remember having those songs on my computer when that album came out, like New and Ex-Boyfriend. So I still enjoyed those songs. And then even Rock Steady, I was still enjoying them up until that point. But at that point, I think it was my biggest thing was the gap. So for me, it seemed like I'd moved on from maybe not moved out, but I was just kind of listening to other things, like stuff that we've covered on this podcast that we're listening to in the early 2000s. So I don't know, it's just maybe my tastes that had differed, or they changed. They went one direction, I went another. Because a lot of the stuff that they started doing on this album, Tragic Kingdom, when they were bringing in the 80s influence, like a lot of the new wave influence, it's stuff that like 5 years later in the early 2000s, we saw rise to prominence again with bands like the Killers that we talked about, where you started seeing that new wave again sort of being embraced and updated for the new generation. And they were kind of the first ones to do that in the mid 90s, I guess.
And where do you hear the new wave? Like, I didn't hear that. Like like where? Yeah, like what song do you really hear? Like what new wave? Like in terms of what new wave? Like what I associate with new wave is like this sort of like this darker electronic kind of pop music that was coming out in the 80s. But I don't know where do you hear it on this album?
Well, I'm thinking more just like the popular new wave, because you're thinking the punk side of it, but it was also like a popular side of it. Like Duran Duran was new wave, and like the Poppy New Order is still new wave. It's all over this album. I think this album is like one of the first ones that kind of brought back a lot of those heavy bass sounds, and just for the sort of the playfulness really of a lot of the 80s new wave, where it seemed fun, like stuff Blondie was doing, or stuff. You had your Devos who were, they had maybe darker themes and darker bass lines and stuff, but there's still a lot of funness and
playfulness.
Playfulness. And there's a lot of that all over this album.
And the 80s guitar too. Like there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I know,
like a squealing whammy bar.
I know for New, which isn't on this album, for that song, they got to produce that track. They got one of the former members of the Talking Heads. So it's something that they strive for too, like being like that 80s new wave.
Oh yeah, and they covered Talk, and they sort of they're one of the for me. I know when this album came out, they were one of the first, like what I was trying to get to. They were one of the first bands that were embracing the 80s new wave and like punk music. But for me, we were 10 years old when this album came out, but it kind of hit a little later. I guess we'll probably get into that. But I was at a young age. So for me, that was the first time there was a band on Much Music who was talking about bands from the 80s, other than the stuff that we heard growing up in the 80s, other than like the Madonnas and the Michael Jacksons and the popular stuff. It was like, bands like Talk and, Duran Duran, who they weren't sort of a thing when I don't really remember them when I was a kid. We were way too young for that stuff. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is the only No Doubt album that I own, like had a physical copy of. So that might be a tell in the direction of how their music went, or how my music taste changed between this album and Return to Saturn.
Well, like the punk ska, mostly like the punky ska aspect of it. Is there any other bands that you guys listen to that had that spice, or that had that direction, or took that direction at all?
Gordon?
I wasn't really a big ska guy myself. I remember hearing it like in soundtracks, and it was very popular in '90s soundtracks, and just in general music videos. It didn't seem like they're in regular rotation. Like I don't see like how often you hear like what Real Big Fish or Goldfinger or anything like that. Like those are the few that I can name off the top of my head. But like I've never gone down the ska rabbit hole to listen to more of it. And I know there is it like a 70s or came to prominence in the 80s? Like they were kind of like a second wave, right?
Well, I think they're considered. I don't know. I was trying to look this up because I was like, are they second wave? And I saw third wave, but
okay.
I don't know. I guess what the first wave would have been the original. So I don't even know when that began. 50s, 60s.
Okay.
I don't even. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that, but I know it because I know ska predates reggae, whereas a lot of people kind of think it's the other way around.
Yeah, right. That's what I would have thought.
Yeah, but yeah. What were we just answering, Gordon?
Well, I kind of brought this up because
the ska influence.
Oh yeah, sorry, I got lost there. But yeah, for me, the ska music, it wasn't that I disliked it. The singles that were around I was listening to, but I never did a deep dive onto albums. But yeah, like Real Big Fish and Goldfinger, they'd get played here and there on the radio, and I would listen to it, or Rancid and God, we had in Canada. We're kind of doing a bit of the ska punk thing too. But yeah, I never really did a deep dive into that sort of.
I think I remember like when I was a kid, I remember hearing about Real Big Fish, and I think I went to the library and I got like a Real Big Fish album, and the reason I didn't really get into it was because all the songs kind of sounded similar, and they were all really short. So it just wasn't like what I was into at that time. Maybe something like probably like 20 years later, I might have a different appreciation for it now.
There was something else that this album brought that I found myself getting more into, was just like the upbeat and colorfulness of everything that they were doing. I saw kind of bands were embracing it after this album, because I feel like before Tragic Kingdom it was all the grunge music and it was all kind of dark and everyone was wearing flannel. But after Gwen Stefani and her style, I know it influenced a lot of the young girls at the time. Like having a young sister, seeing the influence on her was just nuts. But I found that just even in culture, everything became bright. You started having bands like Smash Mouth who were popular from California, or you had, Sugar Ray. They were a punk band and they became like making these power pop songs as well, and they were all colorful, and it was almost like that 97, 98, that time was sort of very bright. I remember it being very bright.
If you're talking about Sugar Ray, never forget about Mean Machine.
Yeah. I played that this week, actually.
Oh, nice. I wouldn't mind watching that music video, because I remember they're like fighting on hockey. I don't know if that was Happy Gilmore, but they're like playing hockey and having like a fight.
How about you, Ryan? Like, what was the influence? Like, you listened to some No Doubt, or do you see any of the influence from them afterwards that you kind of were maybe even more into than No Doubt? Or
well, it was kind of weird. Like, No Doubt happened, and then I saw there was this. As I was playing music, I was playing bands in high school and stuff. There was a whole bunch of small ska punk bands in town, like Seth's band. What was Seth's band? Do you remember the
One Last Grind?
Yeah, One Last Grind, right?
That's my friend from high school.
Yeah. So like all these bands, there was way more of these bands than you would expect for like the popularity of this music. I think it's probably because of, if you're a horn player, like what band are you going to join? Ska band.
But so it also makes me think for the people, because I know I remember at the time there was almost a backlash, but I guess it happens from every punk community. I remember it happening to Green Day when they became big, and then then it happened to No Doubt, where it was sort of like, oh, they're not ska. Like, well, just because they're popular, or just maybe they're more poppier or not as punky than some of the other bands. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. It was getting played on the radio. It brought attention to it, so you got to respect it for that. Because maybe some of those people, maybe even if you didn't like No Doubt, it showed you this ska genre that was there to be explored.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking. Like, is there a big gap between, like, okay, Tragic Kingdom came out, like, how was No Doubt able to keep ska, that style, in the in like the mainstream for long enough for it to kind of, because there was no real ska copycat bands that made it big that I can think of. Can you think of anything like this?
Well, there was like what Gordon said, like Real Big Fish and Goldfinger.
Yeah,
it was more bands that were just kind of, there was more of a microscope on them. It became like almost an aesthetic. I remember when I was playing it this week, my brother, who I live with, was even saying, this sounds like a 90s teen movie soundtrack, just the music that was being played. And I'm like, yeah, it pretty much does. Because I remember movies like American Pie and kind of all the American Pie knockoff movies, they all had this type of music on the soundtrack.
Yeah, I remember like movies like even just like Basketball had this, or like I think a bunch of Kevin Smith movies had that kind of stuff. Like and what was that other song? Like the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. I guess were they ska? Yeah, that was like a massive song when that came out.
Horns.
And then you also had the swing music that kind of also had its moment in 98, 97, 98 around the same time, because this album, like Tragic Kingdom, came out. It came out in 95, but it didn't even pop up on the charts until 96. So it's good that you mentioned that, because I think that's a good segue to our next question of like, what was your first experience with the album? And for me personally, after doing some research and just kind of revisiting my memories of this album, I remember hearing this song, like Just a Girl, in like Clueless and Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion. But Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion didn't come out until 1997. So like as a kid, like I didn't buy this album right away. So it's probably music videos and what was on the radio. And as it picked up steam going into 90s, end of 96, 97 is when this album really took hold on everyone. I remember my first experience with this album was Just a Girl. I remember the music video popping up on Much Music. It just kind of followed something. A VJ didn't introduce it. It just sort of played, and it didn't have, you know how normally it'll come up in the Much Music MTV days, it would say Just a Girl, No Doubt, whatever the record label, all that, whoever directed the music video or whatever they were showing.
Yeah,
that didn't pop up. So I had no idea what it was, but I had it recorded, because at the time I was recording music videos and I just let it record. So I had this song. I had no idea who it was. There's no real way to find out. I assumed the name was Just a Girl, but I didn't really know.
And then you could Google it.
Yeah, and then it wasn't until Spiderwebs came out where I was like, oh, No Doubt. And I was like, oh, this is the same band that played that song that was that we recorded that one time off TV. So it was, it was, I guess we were young, but there's no way back then to look it up. There's no internet to be like, oh, what's this song being played?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned Spiderwebs, because I bought Now Too, which was just like a compilation CD. And I mostly bought it because I had Your Woman Whitetown, because I was like, how do you get that sound and that song? But then Spiderwebs was on it. So it just like made me feel like it just built like how I felt, my appreciation for No Doubt in that song.
Yeah.
That's almost embarrassing to admit to, but.
How about you, Ryan? What was your first time listening to this album?
Well, I can't remember like specifically when I first listened to the album. I do remember hearing No Doubt, like I'm probably Just a Girl on the radio and stuff. And I remember like grade 7 dance or grade 8 dance. It was like, we couldn't request like a Smashing Pumpkins or Nirvana song. They would never play it. It's like, you can't play that stuff. But No Doubt you could kind of like get away with it if you like requested it as a slow dance or something. Like you could actually get some rock music on the playlist. So they were like the bridging band for that situation.
Yeah. Well, another thing too, I kind of hinted at it. This was like the first time I feel like I shared a band I like with my sister.
Yeah, me too.
My sister, like I assumed she kind of liked the stuff we would play at home, me and my older brother, because we were the older two, so we kind of controlled everything. I assumed she liked some of the stuff, but No Doubt was the first time where it was like, no, I like No Doubt. Not just you guys. I also like No Doubt. And like, oh, you bought the CD? No, it's mine now. I'm going to listen to it in my room. It's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what they were like. They were like the band. So you could kind of relate. That's the niche they fell into.
Yeah. Because I even remember like buying her tickets to go see Gwen Stefani when she became solo, like for a birthday, or even buying her Gwen Stefani's clothing line when that was a thing. Like me and my brother bought her this purse that was astronomically expensive, but she was a big fan, and it all started from Tragic Kingdom.
The art.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you guys mentioned that with it being a change like in the 90s. So I think maybe with grunge being like officially going away, because my wife mentioned before I did this episode, she's like, oh, you're doing No Doubt. She's like, the one thing I remember about them is they were a change like from like Hole and that kind of image that was on at the time. And then this kind of just was a different direction, but it was more acceptable like for I guess women or for kids to get into rock, mainstream rock, or it's not grunge or something like that.
I believe the same year you had, I believe Alanis Morissette's album came out in 95.
Mm-hmm.
DJ Harvey, I believe, released an album in 95. But they were a lot more, their music was a lot more serious and it was a lot trying to be more adult. Whereas with No Doubt, it feels like it was a lot more fun and just more party. And a lot of, I know for me having a younger sister, she was more drawn to that than, not that she didn't like Alanis Morissette, but she was just more drawn to No Doubt because it's just.
For sure.
More, yeah.
In the style and in the music, it all lines up, like the cover art, and then in the music you'll have like harpsichord or some weird like Indian instrument. Like they're being real playful with it, and they'll take it in different stylistic directions without issues. They'll have like a ragtime-ish section or something. Like what the heck? Whereas man, I think that kind of stuff when I was younger probably turned me off a bit. I was like, that's not serious. But no,
I was the opposite. I was like drawn to that stuff. I remember loving like in Sunday Morning in the music video where she like cuts her finger and she's bleeding and the song gets all serious with the bass line. And that pretty much, and then that song, that part of the song sort of became Ex-Boyfriend, had sort of that same vibe on the next album. Or like the ragtime part in Excuse Me, Mister. I thought it was like all fun. Like I was like, oh, this is like cool because you don't hear that at the time. The only time we heard ragtime music was in Looney Tunes or
true,
or Animaniacs or something. So it's cool to hear it in actual pop music.
I think it's the aesthetic of punk a little bit that allows them to open up to different stuff where the aesthetic of grunge wasn't like that. It was kind of like reject everything.
Yeah, well, it's like the anti-culture, right? So this isn't popular now. Well, we're going to do it and we're going to make it work. And it's going to be fun when we do it. And I don't know, it worked for me for whenever we did it. For me, it was the songs where they didn't play around that were sort of like, oh, this is kind of a regular song now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree with that to a degree. But one thing that really annoys me about the writing on Tragic Kingdom is the excessive key changes. And I know that's a Gwen Stefani thing because she keeps doing it.
Okay.
It's just, it can get a bit much. Like, so sometimes that you could, you need a balance between, keeping people in or not. What songs are you talking about? What are the normal songs?
Well, I don't know. It's just we'll get into them when we get to the songs.
All right. I'm jumping in.
We'll talk about them when we talk about the songs we see.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to ask.
I will say this is a long album. There's a lot of tracks on this album.
It's about an hour, right?
Yeah, it's an hour, but it's just we can get into it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask one question before we get into the song questions to you guys. So like on a scale or on a spectrum, say, of like rock and pop music, say like REM on one end, Britney Spears on the other, where do you guys see No Doubt? Like in the middle or more on the rock side or more on the pop side? Like with this album or as No Doubt in general?
They're a rock band. They're a band. So
yeah, they're a band. Like
Gwen Stefani.
Yeah, well, they write really good pop songs on this album, but they're ultimately a rock band. And yeah, I don't know. It was funny. I was mentioning today, I was like noticing today when I was re-listening to this album, I'm like, oh, a lot of these songs end very rock and roll-ish, like dun 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 dun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's
almost. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but there's like just to add to that. There's almost like a theatrical side that is aligned with arena rock, just occasionally.
Yeah,
you can get those rock and roll endings.
I will point out, because I was sort of interested today, so I'm like, what is? Because normally when you have a big album like this, you're like, okay, this producer goes on and will do other stuff, right? So I'm like, oh, what did this producer go on and do? And a lot of it was pop music. So he did like Christina Aguilera, Kelly Clarkson, a lot of the pop artists that took on more of a rock edge. in the later 90s. So I'm like, oh, maybe it was pure, like this is a rock album that is very poppy, a lot of great pop songs on here, but ultimately it is a rock song. So it makes sense that those pop artists, when they want that rock edge, they will go to the producer of Tragic Kingdom. His name is Matthew Wilder.
Well, maybe they were looking for a mix, like Gordon mentioned. Like maybe they thought it was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So I guess a little more about Matthew Wilder in context to this album is during their earlier stuff. Eric Stefani, Gwen's older brother, he was heavily involved with like putting the music together. He was the keyboardist. He was heavily involved with writing the songs and like the production and stuff like that. So when Interscope was like, hey, we're going to set you up with a music producer to help you get this album going. Eric was very much against that. He didn't want to work with somebody else. He didn't like somebody else telling him how to do things. And so in 1994, he ended up leaving the band. So he still got writing credits on the songs. He's actually his picture's on the cover of the album, but he left and the band kind of went in the direction of, I guess, more of the poppy kind of stuff. Like
he's still on it.
He's down the road. He's on the cover, but he's not. He didn't tour with them. He left in 94.
Wait, he's on the record.
Yeah. He co-wrote half these songs or a lot.
Did he well, I don't know if he performed, but there's production questions that are like keyboard centric, like why a harpsichord, why a ragtime piano bridge, like so those things. I thought they were him, but if he's not making production decisions for the album, then
I don't know if they're him because like he doesn't have like a writing credit on Excuse Me, Mister, but I don't know. Could also be his influence in the studio. I don't know, like where it would come from. But I don't know. It is
on the album. Now I want to know: did he actually play the damn piano on the album? I think he did.
Yeah, he did. He played on the album. He definitely
played on. Okay.
I think he toured with them a little bit too. I think he sort of like left the band, but he still played shows in support of this, I believe.
Yeah, I think I saw on their timeline that he did come back briefly. Like he left for like a year, maybe 6 months, but he was part of it for like 95-ish, 96.
Yeah.
When it started to like take off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then he left. But I mean, I'm sure he's fine because he was an animator on The Simpsons, and for the Homer Palooza episode, he had them drawn in. So the Homer Palooza episode came out in 96 after this album was released, but it hadn't blown up yet. And he had them drawn in. They're just in the crowd, like with other bands, but like nobody's like, hey, that's No Doubt. They're just background, right? So that was him that did that.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's just an interesting piece of trivia. Okay, so I guess we can get into some song questions. This album, like you guys mentioned, had a ton of singles. There's 14 tracks on the album, and 7 of them were singles. So those singles were Just a Girl, Spiderwebs, Don't Speak, Excuse Me, Mister, Sunday Morning, Happy Now, and Hey You. And that last one's listed as a single, February 23rd, 1998. So that just shows the reach of like this album.
Yeah, they toured and toured and toured. So they're probably just dropping radio singles by the end. Because I think one of the videos is even just live footage cut together. I don't even know if
just half-assing it.
But yeah, no, because this album, because of how huge it was and how it was a slow burn, their touring, it's probably what burned them out. It's probably what caused them to have such a break between albums.
I could see this. Like, holy crap. The album cover itself, I remember seeing that everywhere. Like that is one of the most iconic album covers of our generation, probably because it was on advertisements. It was everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you saw, it was Columbia House. You used to go to the store. Yeah. It's everywhere. Yeah, you're right.
I believe that's how I got it, from Columbia House. Same time I got Rage.
And I guess with it going diamond, it pretty much guarantees like you're forever going to see it in discount bins at UCD stores. Yeah. Like you can buy it for like $1.99 if you want it.
Yeah, that as well.
So now.
Yeah, nobody cares. Well, they don't care, I guess. So what do you think is the biggest song from this album? Anise, go for it.
It's weird because I know Just a Girl was the first single and that was the first song I heard, but it seemed like it wasn't until Spiderwebs came out where they kind of exploded and they were just sort of everywhere, like just being played everywhere. And like this song at the time, well, talk about it more in the overplayed, but it was just being churned out like crazy. I remember just hearing it every hour on the hour. So at that time, you're like, I couldn't imagine any song being released from this album bigger than this, and then Don't Speak comes out. And it's just the biggest thing in the world, and that's ultimately, I believe. I don't know. I didn't look at the number when it spiked, but
yeah,
I feel like when that song came out is when it's like, boom, just it was the biggest thing ever, and it should be. It's a great song. I have to say that's probably the biggest single from this album. Don't Speak, just of how huge it is. I looked on Spotify; it's their most played on there, which is crazy. It's crazy to even say because of how much Just a Girl is an anthem, like a woman's anthem. Like it was even played in like Captain Marvel. Yeah. And it's like a big feminist song, but I would still say Don't Speak is just so giant. Just a perfect written pop song.
Yeah, it is. That's it. It's a pop song through and through, mm-hmm. and it's really well written and nicely produced. And there was a really nice key change that I won't shit on.
And it's cool because it still has like the little bit of experimentation in it. When it goes into the solo, you have the Spanish guitar solo that sounds beautiful as part of that song.
Mm. But just the way the melody moves with the guitar, the chords at the beginning, it's classic. You know, it's not going to turn anyone off. Whereas, you know, a punk song from the 90s might.
Mm-hmm.
But that's got to be the biggest song for sure, right? I'm assuming. I assumed it was as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did I. I mean, I thought either Just the Girl or that. And then I think by Spotify count, when I looked up earlier this week, it was Don't Speak is their biggest song. I mean, it's. I know they have really good music videos, and a bunch come to mind when I list the singles. But that one's probably like the most iconic video mm-hmm. that they have. Just the images that like are in your mind of them being pissed off at her, or like the band breaking up in the video, like all that kind of stuff. And the photo shoot and all that. It just reminds me of that song and how big it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, great song. That's one of the songs when it comes up, I always say it's one of the best written songs that's came out in the 90s at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say. I would agree. It's just very thoughtful. You can just tell every moment's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we could just also quickly mention like the behind the scenes stuff that was going on. Like it's a breakup song because like Gwen and what's his name, Tony Connell, were like, they broke up and they were together for years. So it's like breaking up while recording an album always produces great material and great content.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys, I agree. One of you mentioned earlier that you think it's a perfect pop song. I also think Just a Girl's a perfect pop song too, because it's a 3 minutes, 30 seconds pretty much. You can hear it on the radio. It's catchy as hell. Everybody's into it.
I love that. I love that guitar riff. I remember it's so simple to play, and I remember I learned it, and I would always bust it out like between songs when I was in band.
I remember you busting that out.
Everyone would always right away like, "Hey, that's Just a Girl."
It's Just a Girl. Yeah. Obviously,
that's awesome.
That's all that you'll let me be. That's how I respond.
No, it's funny that you mentioned like that song. I saw an interview with Gwen Stefani, and she was saying originally they were touring with 311, and then they switched. They didn't switch, but that tour kind of ended, and then they started headlining for Bush, and all the audience was always Bush fans, like more into harder rock and stuff like that. So when they were opening, you could see everybody was like not into them. But then the second they played Just the Girl, they would win over the crowd, and everybody knew that song, so they were singing along to it at the end.
Yeah,
and Bush was opening. Hold on. Bush was opening for No Doubt.
They were opening for Bush.
They were opening for Bush.
Oh, okay.
Now I was gonna say this is one of the songs I think is a good mix of that. It's a good mix of that, like the California punk 90s stuff that was kind of coming out of California at the time, and the new wave from New York, just like that guitar riff and a lot of the sounds in it, like even that solo, that keyboard.
Yeah, that's true. I guess today it's like that. Those sorts of sounds are so, synths all over the place, electronics in every music. It's hard to remember what that was like to add that into your song. That's like a special little bit. But I guess when you have a keyboard player who's eccentric, it's a little bit easier.
Yep.
So would you guys say that the song's like overplayed, or what do you guys think is like the most overplayed song? If you had to say like this song, like
I would say for me at the time, I'm gonna go by at the time because now, like I was saying, "Don't Speak" is we were saying it's just so huge that it's one of those pop songs that's always gonna kind of be around. It's not really overplayed. It's played kind of enough where newer generations are still gonna learn about it just through being played on the radio or being put in movies, or people will find out about "Don't Speak." But
Yeah.
I went at the time. I was gonna say Spiderwebs. Spiderwebs just was. I remember I got to the point where I kind of got sick of Spiderwebs back when it first came out. It was just being because when Don't Speak came out, they were still playing Spiderwebs, so it was sort of you were getting the double hit of No Doubt every day, and at that point I'd grown tired of Spiderwebs. So I'd have to go with that one. Not that it's like overplayed now, but just back in 1996, I had enough of it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I personally I had Just a Girl as the overplayed. I have Spiderwebs as my favorite. I totally agree with what you're saying. Like in the 90s, you're like this song was like everywhere. I think the song's kind of faded a little bit. So when I hear it now, it's like I've returned to it more or less.
Yeah, I agree now, and it's one of those things where when I do listen to it now, it's almost like I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good song. Just because at the time I was so sick of it that it was like,
Yeah.
I wasn't really playing it.
Yeah.
I always thought of Just the Girl being on, Just a Girl being on the radio a lot more. That's what I remember anyway. I don't remember Spiderwebs that much.
For me, Just a Girl, like I still like the song, and if I'm playing No Doubt, I'm gonna play that song. But it's probably the most dated out of the big singles out of this album. When you hear it, for me at least, it just kind of takes me right back to the 90s because it was attached to so many movies. And even in Captain Marvel, like I said, it was in Captain Marvel, and that's a movie that takes place in the 90s. So it's almost like used as nostalgia.
That guitar tone is iconic, right? The sound of that riff. Whereas in Don't Speak, it's just classic sounds. So there's nothing that stands out right away as a splice.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying, Ryan. With Don't Speak sounds just more like a classic alternative rock, 90s rock song.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is it even that rocky? I guess it kind of is.
It's kind of like, is it a ballad? It's not really a ballad.
I would say it's more of a ballad.
Yeah, but it's still rocky. Like you have that build up, like where it's like, don't speak, don't.
Yeah.
That's what comes to mind first thing whenever I hear that song.
For me,
it's another example of a tambourine in a cave. I don't know if you noticed that. It's like, psh.
Oh yeah.
Why? I don't know why. This is a common producer decision. Just put the tambourine in a cave.
Yeah, sounds good.
For some reason.
So what did you say was your overplayed, right? Would you think was over?
I was thinking Just a Girl.
Just a Girl.
That's the only thing I remember just being on so much that guitar riff, I think, just became so. It might have been partially Anissa's fault for busting it out at shows to distract people.
But, Anissa overplayed it.
Yeah.
But I also picture like the guitar riff is iconic, but like like I think you said was it the synth or maybe it's also guitar was like towards the end of the song, like in the chorus, like that stuff always sticks with me too.
I think for me, just because I liked Just a Girl more back then, and because it didn't hit at least in Canada right away, and where Spiderwebs did, I was more just like a Just a Girl fan than Spiderwebs at the time. So for me, it was like, why do they keep playing Spiderwebs? Play Just a Girl. Mix it up.
What's bigger on Spotify out of those two?
I believe Just a Girl is second after Don't Speak.
Yeah, I think when I was looking at the discography, those two songs went platinum. I'm not sure if everything else did. I can double check, but
is number 3 on Spotify Sunday Morning? That's what I would guess.
No, that one's a little bit lower. Right? Yeah, that's what I thought too. So that's why I added to get to the next question. What's the most underrated song? I added Sunday Morning as underrated because I thought it would be in the top 5 for sure, but it's not. So it's like way further down the list on Spotify. So I put that as underrated. I know it's a single and it was pretty successful, but at the same time, I love that song. It's great.
Yeah, I had it as one of my favorites. It's probably one of my favorite No Doubt songs overall. I just love that song. Like there's so much to it. Like it seems like every part of the song is different than the last. Like you have your chorus, and then you have the part coming out of the chorus, where that has like the kind of cool drums.
Yeah, the double chorus, the A-B chorus thing. That's a sick. If you already get one awesome hook, and then they give you another hook.
Yeah, and then like I said, like the part where it kind of turns evil with that, when she puts her finger in the video, and the video is even. I like the video. It's a cool video. They got the dude from the Specials just sort of sitting around, walking around. With Specials being one of the bands that influenced them, so they threw the dude. He's like kind of sitting on the swing in the video, which is kind of cool. And it kind of I learned who the Specials were.
Yeah, I mean that video to me as I get older, it's like one of those. It's definitely in my mind. I kind of repurpose it as like a morning after song, or like Sunday morning after you've like had a few drinks and maybe you're hungover now. I don't know, hangovers kill me now. So the next morning, I just always picture myself just being like, I thought I knew you so well, like looking in a mirror and just like thinking of like the night before and like dealing with that. And plus the whole thing of it just being like a chill vibe, like they're all just hanging out and making food. Like it just feels like something you should be doing on a Sunday morning, like just hang out with friends and taking it easy. I mean, fucking pandemic, but it adds to that vibe.
It's illegal now. You can't.
It's a crime. Well. Another thing that I want to point out in that song too is I thought it overlapped the end of the song before it, 16, started the drum fill, but it's all contained on that track on its own. So it kind of overlaps 16 into Sunday morning. But like when the drum kicks off, like the drum roll, that's just awesome. Like you're on your way. It's like a train.
That's probably like my favorite section of the album, where it goes 16, Sunday morning, don't speak. I believe that's the order, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that's like my favorite. Those are probably my I don't know if when you're going to get to the favorite song question, but those are probably my 3 favorite songs, and they're back to back to back.
Yeah, and then right after that's the disco track, right?
Yeah, you're right. You can do it.
So it's like even then, that's a pretty. Maybe it's a bit of a filler song in some sense.
Honestly,
it feels good.
I'll save my I'll save my response to that song when we get.
You don't like the disco track.
When we get to the songs we skip, I'll say my piece about.
Okay, hold on. This is it's a pretty great instrumental track. It's just the lyrics seem a little bit like she didn't care too much. Just they were kind of like the first thing. I
don't think it fits the album. I don't think it should follow "Don't Speak." I feel like the album.
Get rid of it.
I feel like I hit shuffle and it's playing something completely different. Every time it plays, I'm like, is this still okay? It didn't mess up, right? No, it didn't. I just don't think it fits. That's the song that I do not like.
No, okay.
I mean, did you guys want to go? Like, what song do you skip then, Ryan? What's the song that you skip?
I skip a bunch, to be honest. This is one of those albums that I skip. There's a lot of tracks, and Anise is right. That section in the album is great. That middle section, including the disco track. But so I would probably go to that. Actually, I might just go to Don't Speak, and then I would skip around. I skip around a lot. To me, this isn't one of those like listen throughs. Maybe because it's an hour. So if I did listen through it, like I probably would only get halfway through most of the time, and miss a lot of the goods.
For me, there's only like really 3 songs I skip. And for me, partially, it's just the length of the album. I think it's kind of too long.
Yeah.
And the way it's sort of ordered, I'm not the biggest fan of. Like I was even saying today to my brother, I'm like, I should just take this album, cut out the 3 tracks I dislike, which are The Climb, You Can Do It, and World Go Round. Those are the 3 I would probably chop. And
The Climb goes on a bit.
Yeah, it's too long and it does nothing different for me. It's just sort of, even if I do let it play, about 2 minutes in, 3 minutes in, I'm like, I'm not even halfway through this song yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the for me that You Can Do It doesn't really fit after Don't Speak, so I skip that one. And then World Go Round, I just don't like that song. So those are the 3 I skip. I know it seems like a lot for an album that I like, but there's 14 tracks, so it's still 11 songs.
Yeah.
I think
those are
out of the other 11, like any of them can be singles pretty much. And a lot of them were.
Yeah, I think the other thing with it too is like, since these songs, like the singles are played so often, even today, that there's like, when you hear a song that isn't a single, you're like, it's just still doesn't fit because this album's just like so many singles, right? Like it's all ear candy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
for the climb, I had the note like that's the classic song that you hear like on Behind the Music when the band's like facing adversity. It's like
Yeah.
the band was touring for 2 long years and their future was in doubt, and then you cue like the climb.
The climb, it adds a nice like 50s kind of Elvis waltzy kind of vibe, which is nice. It's a nice spice to the album, but it's just too long. Like I feel like if that was part of a song,
because even like for me when the song first starts, it's not like I dislike it. I'm like, oh, like this song is just graining to listen to. It just gets long in the tooth. So especially on a long album when you have a 6.5 minute song, if you're trying to get to, especially if you want to get to the songs that you really like that are kind of later after that song, is he started just jumping on the next button.
Yeah, so, I didn't even realize it's 6.5 minutes long. That's really long.
Yeah.
Gordon, how do you feel about You Can Do It? Am I the only one who likes the song?
It's okay. It's yeah. I mean, I like that it's a disco. It adds a little variety to the album. In terms of kind of everything else that's going on. It doesn't sound like a rock song per se. It's more just, it sounds like a pop song. It fits on the album. It's nothing I skip personally. How do you feel about it, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, the whole band, it seems like I think I remember reading the whole band wrote this song. So the sense I get is that it's more of like a jam instrumental track, and Gwen Stefani was there and she like, would sing some lines and just whatever she sang stuck. It wasn't like she had to write this awesome thing and bring it to the band and they had to like be, oh, that's really good. She didn't have to impress anybody. It was just a jam track. So when you listen to it, it's like, it's more about the instrumental stuff that's going on than her. Mm-hmm. But when you're a kid, you don't want to listen to that. You want to sing along with the singer. You don't care about, disco. So maybe Anise, it's just a hangover for when you're a kid. Don't you like disco now?
I think for me, I think it's more just a placement that does a lot of the I'm not into this vibe for me. Maybe if it was earlier on in the album, but just following Don't Speak, I think that's a horrible idea. Because like Don't Speak is so good and just the way it ends is great. And then it's like, what's going on? Did I hit shuffle? but no, that's my main issue from this album is like, I know I mentioned it a couple of times that it's long, but I think what makes it feel longer is the flow of the album. I feel like if they move some stuff around, like I feel like Tragic Kingdom would fit better at the beginning, and then
really,
yeah, just it makes the most sense. Welcome to the
like Tragic. It as an ender.
Well, it says Welcome to the Tragic Kingdom.
Well, that's the obvious thing to do.
And then Ended on This sounds, I know it's called Ended on This, but Ended on This is a great song and it's a great like closing track to this album. I think that would be a great closing track.
That's the obvious thing to do, but I don't think Tragic Kingdom musically is necessarily the best start. And also, it's like a big theatrical,
I know, but it's worked on other albums, like on what was that Silverchair album? It opens with Emotion Sickness, the big track. It works.
They were like 12 years old when they made that decision.
No, they weren't.
That's funny.
I just feel like that'd be a better opener. I think it just hits, and it would just kind of, not that Spiderwebs isn't a great song, but I feel like Spiderwebs would fit nicely after Don't Speak to pick back up after the slow track. I don't know. I have a lot of ideas. I feel like I could make an 11-track version of this that's more streamlined and would flow a lot better. For me, it just seems like they threw a lot of ideas and were like, let's record this. A lot of it is great. And like I said, like 90% of this could be a single, but I don't know. I feel like it could just use that a little bit better to flow a bit better. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
No, it does feel like they did throw everything at the wall sometimes, especially when suddenly there's a disco track. So yeah. I understand that. But
because for me,
I guess maybe as I'm older, I appreciate the disco track more. And I appreciate the reggae, or not the reggae, sorry, the ragtime section more. Just those little playful things. Whereas before, when I was younger, I was like, not serious.
They get into that nice pocket of 16 Sunday Morning Don't Speak. And then you go to that, you're like, oh, we're changing it up again. And then after that, they kind of don't. they kind of just go back to what they were doing before. After that, they don't really lean into the disco in any other places. So it just seems out of place. Just seems out of place. Not that it's a bad song per se. It just seems out of place after Don't Speak and on this album. Sorry, it's just how I feel.
We get it. We get it.
That's fine. No, for the song I Skip, all the reasons why, and he said he liked ended on this. I think that's why it could be cut, because I think it's a if that song was removed, would you notice? Like, it's a good setup song, but it thinks it's the closer when Tragic Kingdom is truly the closer. Like, that's a good song. And maybe the placement can be debated, but like ending it on Tragic Kingdom, I think makes sense. But having a song before it called Ended on This, I mean, you could remove that and you're getting to the end that much faster.
It seems like the album, it seemed like the album's even asking you to end it on this, and it keeps going.
No,
it keeps going, exactly.
That's the obvious thing to do. You got to think punk, man. You put the beginning at the end. You got to twist that shit up. You got to reject the establishment.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think of Ended on This, Ryan, or Tragic Kingdom, like how the album ends or goes out?
I think Tragic Kingdom's a better song. Like, I like that more. I just really love that line where they're descending, like, kind of chromatically. Welcome to that thing is really cool. And that I listen to, it's like I wait for that. I'll wait through anything in that song to get to that part. That's the juiciest part.
Yeah, because I know what you mean by it's not like a great opener in the sense that it gives you a representation of what you're about to hear. But I think for me, it would act more as an intro. And I do think if it was an intro, you'd probably make different production decisions, especially closer to the end of the track. But I don't know. I feel like it would be a good like slap in the face of
kind of like what the Killers did with Sam's Town.
Yeah, a little bit more of a dramatic sort of musical. But again, I think it's the aesthetic of like, no, man, that's the obvious thing to do. You want to put the beginning at the end. Because
even for me, like to get to, I know Gordon was saying how Sunday Morning was underrated as a single, but I was going to say even Excuse Me, Mister, which is another one of their kind of more of their harder tracks on the album. And I think because I know for me, that was the first one that I really kind of really gravitated towards. Being young and the other type of music at the time was more similar to Excuse Me, Mister, just with like how upbeat and aggressive, kind of more had an aggressive side to it as compared to some of the other tracks. But it had like that ragtime part to it. It has the dark part coming out of that as well. So the song does a lot, and you still have the high energy. You have a great bass line. It's pretty much just a straight up punk song, but it's great.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorites on the album too.
Yeah,
really good. That bridges and the horns in there. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Is that the first like really horny part on the album? Like, there's not really horns and spiderwebs, right?
I think at the beginning, the very first like 10 seconds of Spiderwebs.
Spiderwebs is horns throughout the whole thing.
I don't think of it that way in my head. I think of it more of a punk.
As like the reggae thing at the beginning, and then it gets into
it. I guess so. I just think of it more of a rock song because of the energy. I guess that's just in my head.
Is there a song that you skip, Ryan? Did you answer that?
Yeah, well, I kind of gave a bullshit general answer, which is I kind of skip around. So I can go through this, but I do like the album a lot. I'm just saying, like, I kind of skip around a lot. Like, Spiderwebs is great. Excuse Me, Mister is great. Just a Girl, I might skip it because, you know, I've heard it a million times. Thanks, Anise. And then if I skip that, I'm probably going to go, I like Different People a lot. Probably go that. And if I was going to, I would probably skip to 16. That's The Climb because it's too long. Hey You, I'm not a huge fan of Hey You. I'm surprised it was a single, actually. Like, I didn't think it was too.
I think it's their last single.
Hey You kind of reminded me of like a Britpop. Kind of gave me early Blur vibes.
Okay.
I think it's part of what I was saying though. Like a lot of this album seems like they just did a bunch of ideas. Like they had what they wanted to do with the whole ska and punk sound and with incorporating some of their other influences, but it seemed like they were also trying a bunch of other stuff, which is cool. I love hearing it. But you just kind of but you end up getting a lot of it, which you kind of which is what fucks with the flow, which is why Ryan likes to bounce around. Like, how about you, Gordon? Is there what songs do you skip, or do you bounce?
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of, I don't, if I'm listening to this album, I usually put it on to listen to it. But with like some towards the end, that's usually where I'll skip, like tracks 11 through 14. That's where I'll probably get into skip territory. I do like Tragic Kingdom, so I do want to hear that song usually when I'm listening to this album. But like I guess You Can Do It, World Go Round, ended on this. After a while, it's starting to count the same. So I'm just trying to get to Tragic Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just kind of like rock. Like it's just like I said earlier, it's like ear candy. Like you have the singles, are singles. They're like almost perfect pop rock songs. And then the other stuff, like you guys are saying, I mean, we could all probably attribute this to how long the album took to record, because I think it took over 3 years to record, or 2 years to record. And like Interscope shelved a bunch of songs. So it probably was a lot of like, let's just throw everything that we got at the record label and see what sticks.
Yeah, there's a lot.
That's why I feel like if I could just draw out like 10, 11 tracks, there's a much more solid album in there. But I guess at the time for them, they were probably the major labels putting all this money into a ska band. So they probably wanted them to, kind of play with their sound a bit, just so it would be played on the radio. Like Gordon was saying, they got the producer to give it more of the pop sound. Sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. But also, like, it's probably a good thing they had this much material on this album, because they rode this album for quite a while. So that was a lot for people to get into, a lot for people to listen to.
And it's not like they stopped playing around. Like, even in the future, it did get a lot more poppier and radio friendly. You can even attribute it to them introducing a lot of the elements that made it poppier to pop music. But they would lean more into dance music later on, and reggae and dance hall, and they tried a bunch of stuff. So it's not like they stopped experimenting.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned like they experiment, like they refuse to allow themselves to get pigeonholed in something, even though they want to strive to always make like great singles or great pop songs. But they were just going in different directions that were also interesting and worth listening to.
Yeah.
So I think earlier we were talking about a favorite song, but I think we missed you, Anise. What's your favorite track on this one, on Tragic Kingdom?
I would say that three track run of 16, Sunday Morning, Don't Speak. Those are probably like my three favorite. It's hard to pick like one.
16, eh?
Yeah.
Doesn't make my top three.
Well, cool.
Okay.
I love the distorted bass sound. It's a good mix of everything that they're good at on it. I just think it's a solid track. I love that electric piano sound, or whatever it is on there. I don't know. It's just, and I think it's mainly just that chunk of the album, because for me, this album, like what Ryan was saying with the whole bouncing around, for me, it's the same thing. It's like you have the chunks, like Spiderwebs to Just a Girl, and then you have Different People. I'm a big fan of that as well. Then you have 16 to Don't Speak. So even when you're jumping around, it's like those three, and then maybe Different People. Then you might, like, for me, I like Hey You isn't bad, but I understand what Ryan's saying by it not being one of the more stronger tracks. But yeah, no, that section of the album is probably the one I revisit the most, though.
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought of breaking the album into sections like that, but yeah, I see what you mean. Like the first, to me at least, when I'm listening to it, I'm like, the first 4 tracks just flow. I don't know if that's just because they're singles. And then Different People sounds like it's from a different album, or it's just not like what those 4 tracks are. And then you're right, the 16, Sunday Morning, Don't Speak, that's a good stretch. And then maybe those last 3 songs, or those 3 songs after are just the strongest. But yeah. I see what you're saying.
So You Can Do It splits the album at the end.
I'm gonna try it this week. After today, I'm going to make a playlist of the order that I would prefer it in, and leave out the tracks I don't like, and see. I'm going to do an experiment for myself and see how it flows, and see if I like it better.
Will Tragic Kingdom be the first track?
Yeah, it'd probably be.
Nice.
I would have to sit down with it, but I do know Tragic Kingdom would be first, and maybe Excuse Me, Mister second. But because I'd move Spiderwebs after Don't Speak.
Right.
I think if it went 16, Sunday Morning, Don't Speak, Spiderwebs, and then ended on this, that'd be perfect ending to the album. But
Then you got to build a time machine. Go back.
Really I know I'm nitpicking a lot, but that's just how I feel.
And you got to think too, like, okay, so like when they released this album, they probably didn't expect it to go diamond. When they were touring with Bush, they said like for the first like 2 or 3 months, they were small, they were following them around, but like 3 months later, the album was certified platinum. So that changed everything for them. So like I don't even know if they knew what they had when they released this album.
Well, the issue for me is that I do like a lot of these songs quite a bit, and I would revisit the album a lot more. And I'm trying to figure out why I don't, because it's not an album I turn to as much as other albums, but I will return to singles, and I'm trying to figure out why. Because I do like other songs that I don't listen to all the time as well. And I'm like, maybe it's just the flow. Maybe it's just this. So I know I'm being nitpicky, but
no, it's the same with me. I skip all over the place. Like I do feel like it's in chunks. Like there's little good pockets of it. So you can do that better. And I'm sure I'm not we can't be the only ones.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, no, I don't think so. It's hard now with music now. It's so easy just to throw on a playlist or hit play on No Doubt and just let Spotify take you through them.
Yeah, because even the later single, like the later album singles that I might not have even been the biggest into, like they're not so bad that I'm like, oh, this is horrible. Like I'm not gonna listen to this playlist. Or they're still good enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So sorry, did you guys have any other song questions or anything? Just in case I skipped anything or forgot to mention anything.
I'm trying to think if there anything else from any other songs I wanted to point out.
Sunday Morning's great. I think we already mentioned that, but I think like that's one of my top 3 on the album. So it didn't even make that for Anis's top.
What, Sunday Morning?
Yeah, it's better than 16.
That's what I said. Sunday Morning.
You said Don't Speak, 16, and what else did you say? Something else.
No. 16, Sunday Morning, and Don't Speak. They're back.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. And I pointed out as Sunday Morning being my favorite No Doubt song. Come on, Ryan, pay attention.
I'm on a different podcast right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to do a top 3 for this album, I'd probably go like Spiderwebs, Sunday Morning. I'm not really, doesn't matter what order. And then probably Just a Girl, because it's like, it's hard to say that song, because I'm like, it's such ear candy. Like I'm like, it's like a pop song. Like I wasn't thinking like Don't Speak as their song, but that's such an iconic song by them. I mean, yeah, it'd probably be. It's like to me when I hear Don't Speak, I think of like Alive by Pearl Jam. Like it's just like, oh, that's the song. Like, but it is such a good song that it's hard to deny it.
That's my top 3 if you include Don't Speak.
Yeah,
Just a Girl out.
Yeah.
But I mean, Just a Girl would probably be number 4.
You can have a top 3. You can have like a top 5.
Yeah, I mean, their top 5 or 6 singles are like all great.
Well, yeah, because like I was saying, I could, especially during that era, like any of these songs could have worked as singles, especially post this album, because they made this whole bouncy, poppy rock sound like more prevalent, I guess, and it was becoming popular with them in bands like Green Day and Offspring and stuff like that, turning more pop in their later releases. Now, any one of these songs I can just imagine on the radio at the time. Like there's maybe 1 or 2 songs that I can't picture on the radio.
So Anis, you should take other No Doubt songs, just a couple extra, add them to this list, and then split the album in 2 and set up 2 different sets of singles. No, separate. Like do you think they would have done better off of 2 separate discs as opposed to 1 that they wrote out for 2 or 3 years or whatever?
Oh, you mean like have 2 Tragic Kingdoms, like break it down into 2 7-track albums or something?
Yeah, well, you'd have to have like 7-track albums. Probably wouldn't be enough, especially in the 90s. Yeah, right, because if people are expecting 10 tracks at least, so or 11.
That was something I noticed this week too, because I went back and I was listening to No Doubt, so I was listening to some of the other artists from the 90s this week. Like I listened to Bush and I listened to, it's just some other bands, and all the albums back then, 14 tracks, 13 tracks, 15 tracks. Whereas now you're getting 10, 9, 10, 11. That's it.
For sure. 3.
I think we just have less of attention, or you just get singles now. We just have less of attention spans. But it's also why this album worked so well. There's so many just individual tracks that are great. So
yeah, there was enough singles to carry 2 albums, probably.
Yeah.
You just need a couple extra songs. But
But no, they paid their dues that time. Like it took the album a year to even really start showing up on people's radars, and then after that, they just kept touring and touring, and they became like now they're household. Well, Gwen Stefani's a household name. Like my mom knows who Gwen Stefani is.
yeah.
Did you guys have any other things to add about songs specifically that we might have missed before we, I guess, get into more album related questions?
Just want to say Sunday Morning is a great song. I'll point that
It
out.
is. Yeah, it is. I mean, another song that I wanted to mention as well, it's not on this album, but I'm a big fan of, is New. It's more like, it came out in 99. It feels more like a rock song, and it's like they're getting away from like the ska stuff and they're just getting more into like the rock that was out at that time. And it's just catchy as hell. It was on the Ghost soundtrack, and then they put it on their album after because it was so successful.
I feel that's kind of what happened. Like the ska spice edge came to the mainstream with No Doubt on the backs of, more of the pop punk that was coming out, maybe like just slightly before, but it never really caught. Like the horns didn't stick around much. Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, maybe that was the last big horn song.
We had the ska, like the ska boom, like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, but then the swing. We had the Cherry Poppin' Daddies and Brian Setzer Orchestra and Squirrel Nut Zippers. Like horns had a moment.
I'm saying, okay.
Like big band horns, at least.
I guess it was in the mainstream, is what Ryan's trying to say.
Different.
Because I guess that market always exists.
Yeah, I was talking about ska in the mainstream. That little bit of like the reggae ska spice. I mean, you're right about the big band thing, I guess, but I still don't know about mainstream really. Like how much
it was mainstream. They were playing
like top 40s.
No, they were playing Brian Setzer Orchestra on the Edge. They were playing Brian Setzer Orchestra on Much Music. Like it had a moment. They were at Woodstock. Like,
do you think No Doubt had anything to do with that?
Probably, sure. Because I didn't even know what ska was, and now like you have ska with the skanking, and then the swing dancing is kind of like a
I see it now.
Organized way of skanking, but it was very similar. Like because even Brian Setzer Orchestra was. Brian Setzer from the Stray Cats, which was a 80s like new wave punk ska band. So, and he was making big band music. So they do share sort of that part of it. So it did have a moment. And then then indie rock uses horns all the time.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know if there's any sort of relation between the two, but
yeah, I don't think we can just trace horns themselves as like an influence, but
no, I would say the only real tie I see is like that little bit where ska bands got some attention, and then you had the swing bands that for that one summer were big because of Gap.
Yeah, but the ska thing definitely pervaded the underground around here. Like the skanking was every show we weren't playing any ska music, and there was people skanking. Like.
Became a thing.
What's that expression? Like a high tide raises all ships. I feel like that's kind of what it was. Like, I mean, you have an album going diamond, and then everything like is trying to. People who like that sound, it's so unique that they're trying to find like other offshoots to it. So I think, I mean, to say like without no doubt, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones or whoever wouldn't be at Woodstock. I don't know if that's true, but at the same time, they definitely got a push, and you could say they helped pave the way a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is, like I said, this is the only No Doubt album that I own. So I thought I'd just take it out and just have a quick look at it. Some trivia with it. I did read somewhere that the red dress that she wears on the cover was put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but somebody stole it in 2005. So yeah, you can't. It was appraised for $5,000 at the time.
Probably OJ.
What?
Oh man, there's like all these lyrics. And then, so yeah, I guess there's all the liner notes from OC. Yep. And then they have all the lyrics on the other side. So remember, like albums back in the day, you just had like all the lyrics.
People not watching on YouTube, Gordon is showing the liner notes
here. So yeah, this is the only No Doubt album I have. I'm surprised I don't have the greatest hits, but at this point I'm not going to go out and buy it.
Yeah, you got Spotify now. You're all good.
Yeah, I'm rocking and rolling.
Right on vinyl.
So I guess this can kind of get us into our kind of closing band questions. How often is this album in your rotation? I know we just kind of hinted at it and we talked about it throughout. This album, I usually go and throw it on like if I'm in the mood to listen to this specifically. But now in the age of Spotify, I think I'm more in like a playlist kind of mode with No Doubt. How do you guys feel about them?
Yeah, it's always been like singles, and not just singles, like single songs or like little sections of the album for me. So it's Don't Speak. I probably go back to, but yeah. And Sunday Morning, those two songs I go back to. And if I like, get started, I'll pick out some other songs. But those are my gateway, my starter songs.
So if you had access to radio, you were like out hearing the radio more often, do you think that fulfills like your No Doubt itch? Like it scratches that itch for you?
The amount of No Doubt that's on the radio right now?
Is that enough to suffice your hunger for No Doubt at any given time?
Maybe. Like there's enough No Doubt on the radio. There's enough Gwen Stefani. I mean, but yeah, I'd say that. I hear Sunday Morning occasionally, like at a bar on the playlist. I mean, before all this shit.
Yeah, I mean, for me at least, that's how I fall in. I say every couple of years if I'm in the mood, hey, I want to hear this album. I haven't heard like Sunday Morning in a while. So for me, that's why I'm always like, I think the radio does a good enough job of playing No Doubt, and that's my exposure to it most of the time. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Denise?
They play a lot of Gwen Stefani though, so that's a distinction.
They do too. So maybe it's Gwen Stefani siphoning off No Doubt listens because I'm hearing it.
Happening.
For me, it's more so like certain, like what Ryan was saying, certain sections of the album that I revisit the most, or individual tracks on playlists. Like if I'm making a 90s, it's like a summer, if I'm having like a summer barbecue, I might make like a summer barbecue playlist, and a lot of these songs will be featured along with a lot of that, like that California power pop punk stuff that was happening in the late 90s with, even some, I was even saying today, like we make nowadays, they turn into like a joke, but the band Smash Mouth, that song Walking on the Sun, great song.
It's a good song, yeah.
And it does seem like it's almost like it doesn't have the ska part of it, but it's very akin to like almost the same sort of, like you picture it on the same barbecue mix is why I would put them. But for me, their influence is more of that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff I will go back to them for with this album, is just if I'm having a backyard barbecue or I just need something upbeat to put on.
Yeah.
I don't really throw the album on that much, but it's one of those things where when I do go back to revisit certain songs, it isn't just the singles. There are songs like 16 or what was that? The Different People that I enjoy from the
deep cuts.
Album. The deep cuts, yes. Whereas a song like Just a Girl, I won't revisit as much because I do feel like it is kind of more dated just because of how attached it was to a lot of the popular culture at the time, like being in movies like Clueless. Because like when I'm watching a movie like Clueless, I'll hear Just a Girl, or like I was saying earlier, they try to recapture the 90s and Captain Marvel's, they use Just a Girl. I feel like it's more attached to an era as opposed
it's almost
to
cliche approaching.
Or a song like Don't Speak. Yeah, a song like Don't Speak is more timeless, and you can put it on. That song could have been a single last week, and it probably would have charted. It had really nothing to do with time. It was just a great song.
When you cut out the fat and fix the start of the album, are you gonna leave Just a Girl out of it?
No, it'll be on it. No. That's not fat. That's quality, right?
If you're gonna skip it anyway.
What? I don't skip it.
Well, you said you might, may not go to Just a Girl because you heard it. It's kind of iconic.
Oh no, Just a Girl, not Don't Speak.
No, Don't Speak. I know you keep that.
Yeah, no, Just a Girl.
I'm not questioning Don't Speak. Just a Girl. Yeah. Would you?
No, I said. Well, I said it already. I think it sounds dated. Like it's more dated because of it being attached to a lot of the culture back then. So that's why I'm more akin to not listening to that song as opposed to something like Different People, where my only attachment to it is liking it, not really being in every movie and every TV show and if they're doing like a montage in a movie and they're going to represent the 90s, they're going to throw Just a Girl in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, yeah, revisiting it's just certain songs for different scenarios. Yeah. How about you, Gordon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mostly, unless I want to visit it, I'll put it on, but usually just the radio. I think No Doubt's kind of everywhere. Like I mentioned before we started recording. I don't know if it's just a coincidence because I was listening to No Doubt this week, but it seemed like my wife, she was watching a TikTok this morning, had Just a Girl, and I was walking the dog last night, and some guy was parking his car, and he had his windows rolled up because it's cold, but you can hear through it. He's playing Hey Baby. So it's like, is it just this week, or is it just because No Doubt is like such a beast when it comes to radio play?
Yeah, well, and like with Gwen Stefani having the new song that she released at the end of last year, or early this year, I forget. They're probably, she's back she's back in the news, so people are probably throwing it on the radio, or they're probably popping back up on Spotify playlists. Who knows?
Yeah,
yeah.
It makes it into soundtracks and stuff for sure. It'll just get another bump.
I always like to hear Anissa's perspective on this, like especially with the rotation question, because like I think Ryan and I, before the pandemic, we've listened to the radio more often as opposed to Anissa doesn't really listen to the radio. So it's like, what do you think of No Doubt now?
They never left the radio play. Sorry to get back to that, but yeah, they were always in the rotation. It was never they disappeared and came back or anything like that. Their songs were always there.
Yeah, for me, it was always, because even when Return to Saturn came out, I liked that album, but I don't remember listening to it as much because, like I was saying, I moved on at that point. I was listening to more of like indie rock or, the early 2000s stuff by that point. But then after that, it was just sort of singles because it was, we were at the age where we were going out drinking and they're making music for partying. So it's sort of, you go to the club, they're going to play hella good. You don't have to throw it on, or they're going to play No Doubt. And it's not like I was, that crazy into their deep cuts. Like, I'm sure they're fine albums. I just never, at that point, No Doubt wasn't really on my radar personally for new music. At that point, I'd moved on to, like, my taste had gone in different directions. But this album, yeah, like, I'm a very scatterbrained when it comes to going back to listen to old music. So I might go through a week where it's all like, I'm going to listen to No Doubt and Sugar Ray and Rancid, or I'm going to listen to that Real Big Fish song I haven't heard in 20 years. I'm going to listen to that Goldfinger song, So that's my relationship with them now, is that, and they're kind of the leaders of that sort of sound.
Yeah, that's cool. Sure. Where do you guys rank this album in No Doubt's discography? I guess kick it off, Anissa, because you kind of started it there.
Yeah, top. Like I said, I didn't really follow them too much afterwards. But I listened to the albums enough that I kind of got a sense to them. Just Tragic Kingdom is too iconic to avoid. Their two first albums I never really listened to too much. I know certain singles, like Trapped in a Box is a great song, but I didn't really grow up with them, so I never really went back to revisit them. I don't know. Maybe if I had the internet in 95, I would have downloaded them and listened to them. But yeah, so it's probably the top, and then Return to Saturn. And then after that, I didn't listen to them enough. Like Rocksteady was pretty good, but I didn't really listen to them enough to rank anything. But yeah, number one.
Yeah, I'm going to say this is their best. I mean, I don't know. This is the only one I had. So, but it seems to carry like more impact. Do you think the singles from this get more airplay than like newer singles of No Doubts?
I don't know. I think that's tough because like Hey Baby,
are they still riding it? Yeah.
Maybe the ones that have like more influence in like the other genres of music, like the reggae influence, I think they do. Because if they do, like if you think of the songs like Ex-Girlfriend or New, those are kind of relegated to the rock side of things. So you're only going to hear them on rock stations, but like Hey Baby or I don't know, the songs from that era, Underneath It All, for example, you're going to hear that on pop and maybe rock as well.
The thing that's weird though, it seemed like it happened so fast because it had been 5 years since Tragic Kingdom, and then Return of Saturn came out, and it was, I don't know, I enjoyed that album. It was more leaning into the rock stuff like Gordon was saying. But then the year later is when Rocksteady came out. and then right away there were like dance hall influence and
Yeah.
this other, and it was just seemed like they were making it purely because Return to Saturn didn't have those radio singles, so now they're like, okay, we need to release this for the radio now. I
remember that.
It almost gave off those vibes because it happened so quickly. It's like Return of Saturn didn't hit right away, so they went back into the studio and came up with something else.
Yeah, I remember that coming out and everybody being like, whoa, they're really poppy all of a sudden.
Yeah, and then they sort of just...
And then Gwen Stefani came along with her solo stuff, and it was really poppy. And like, oh, I see. I see what was going on.
I think she worked because she had like a lot of really dancey tracks that I really liked, especially at that point we were, club going age. So it was good to have, someone we're familiar with from growing up with No Doubt now singing on dance tracks for us in the club, which was cool.
That was probably very strategic on her part, but like, yeah, you're getting the people that grew up with the rock 90s kids, and then they hear it at the club. It's like, yeah, that's even better. Like, keep playing that. So yeah, Bananas, all that stuff.
I remember even when I was DJing at the guest store for a sale, and it was like rock. They wanted rock theme, and they're like, "Can you play like rock like dance remixes of rock songs?" And it's like, okay.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think I played that "What You Waiting For" by Gwen Stefani. Yeah, fit with the aesthetic.
So where do you guys place this album in terms of music history, or maybe just 90s music history to make it more specific? Or you can answer the question however you want. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, you're getting close to the final question by...
Yeah, you can segue.
By treading here. Let's say...
You can go for it if you want to answer both.
You could probably combine those questions, maybe.
I honestly don't... Like, maybe you said there was some, like, there's a bit of a swing boom, but I honestly don't think the ska thing lasted. The skanking lasted, and the underground ska bands lasted. But in terms of mainstream... that like reggae, ska, punk mix, that particular balance, I don't think that lasted very much. But that being said, well, I'll just leave it there. I'm going to save the rest of my comments for the final question. So the impact in history was kind of like, it didn't really have that much of a lasting impact. I'm trying to think of musically what elements from No Doubt, continued because of them.
See, so this, going back to what I was asking, I think at the beginning with the whole spectrum thing, is it because they're just like too poppy that they don't have like traditional rock? Like when you're do you teach any No Doubt songs to your students?
I can't think that I've had a No Doubt request. I've played Sunday morning in like a wedding band. That was a lot of fun. That was at the drums. So yeah. But no, I don't think I think actually maybe a later Gwen Stefani track I had to teach. But yeah, I haven't had to teach any No Doubt. So are they because they were too poppy? Well, what was the uniqueness of No Doubt? Maybe it was the balance of those things, but it didn't seem to take. Nobody else could quite the whole playfulness, but she's still pretty hot. So like the whole package, nobody else could. I don't know. Like what other ska bands made it big?
Yeah, other than like the two or three that we kind of named, I don't. There's nothing that
big comparatively. Do they have platinum albums?
I think their influence is. I'll answer the question. I think their influence is beyond like. When I look at them, I'm not like, oh, what was their influence to ska music in the mainstream? Yeah. For them, it was more so. I think it was partially like the aesthetic, like their whole colorful party. It seemed like they were having a lot of fun. Each member seemed like a different character onto their own. Women loved Gwen Stefani. She became like a style icon. Became, I saw the huge influence on my sister. And I think they affected the mainstream quite a bit. And the fact that Gwen Stefani is still around and still relevant on The Voice, and she's still releasing music that people care about. And this song just was so big, 10 million. It went diamond. I think it's 10 million in America. I think it's 16 million worldwide. It went diamond. And these singles are so iconic. A song like "Don't Speak" is, I think, one of the best pop songs ever. You know, like at least in our generation, and it's on this album, along with a song like "Just a Girl." That's like a feminist anthem, a woman's anthem. It's still played regularly. I think this album is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this influence of this album is still kind of going, because it wasn't just the music. It was like the package of it all, and just how it brought all these different sounds. It brought all this different aesthetic. It brought like a whole different to that the 90s world.
It was that attitude and playfulness that lasted. That was the lasting impact more than the music.
I think if you want to see the impact, just search pictures from the 1997 MTV Music Awards. Just look how everyone is dressed, and you will know No Doubt's influence.
I think, just to add on to that, what you're saying there, Anise, I think it's No Doubt kind of works in two ways. One where, like, yeah, it stands on its own for music, or you're a kid of the 90s, or just great 90s alternative rock. And then also you have this whole other Gwen Stefani part of it. So like you think of like, yeah, the impact on women, female-led band on its own. Like, I mean, the big competition at the time would have been like Hole. So this kind of moved that in a new direction, which I think was a welcome direction to the mainstream. So I don't know. I think if Gwen Stefani wasn't as like as influential or as charismatic as she is, would the music still stand as highly as it does, or be as popular as it is? I don't know. But I think it does. This album and No Doubt kind of balance two things really well, even if now you can't tell the difference between a No Doubt song and a Gwen Stefani song.
Mm-hmm. I think that you could be right that the whole album wouldn't. These songs may not have lasted as long if it wasn't for the character of Gwen Stefani and how much she's done since then, except for maybe Don't Speak. That could maybe have been sung by anybody.
I'm going to flip what you guys are saying completely on its head. I don't think Gwen Stefani would be where she is right now without this album.
That's true too.
Her fame is purely based on this album. If she was not this album and everything after it, she would not be who she is right now. You look at her, I remember looking at her Vegas show, the set list, it was these songs. You know what I mean? Like, she's still singing the No Doubt songs. Like, yeah, she had Holla Back Girl, and, was it Underneath It All? Was that No Doubt, or was that her? I can't even remember.
That's No Doubt. Yeah, still No Doubt.
So the lines are blurred. But yeah, so maybe the lines are blurred now, but it all stems from this. It's like saying, was the Jackson 5 ever popular, or was it Michael Jackson? Well, he was in the Jackson 5, and the Jackson 5 had hit songs, so therefore they were also popular.
Yeah. But what if Gwen Stefani died after Tragic Kingdom and all of the touring and all the shit? Would we still be listening to No Doubt?
Oh yeah, it'd probably be iconic for other reasons.
That's true.
Yeah, they'd be like AC/DC when they had to switch lead singers or whatever. But
I think that would have been the end of the band, to be honest.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Although they did deal with like suicide in the past in their history and stuff like that. So I mean, they have had. But I mean, Gwen Stefani's so iconic. I don't know. Yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying, Anise. That the band, this album, plus their future, like if you can evaluate like that, are working together to create. And it's all just marketing, right? Like people are like, oh, like Gwen Stefani. It's like, I've heard this other song. It's going to lead you back to No Doubt.
Yeah, because it's her, like, where everything begun. So it's hard to judge her fame and with disconnecting this of it, because her fame is purely based on this existing.
Yeah, sure. And it's not like it's bad. It's not like she's got like what we mentioned earlier with like Sugar Ray or Smash Mouth, where maybe they got punk roots or something, or stuff that's not as radio friendly. It's like this stuff is always kind of just been good. It stands on its own. They
always played around with sound, and it's not like after Rocksteady they released 10 other albums that sounded like Rocksteady. After Rocksteady, they didn't release an album for over 10 years. And the one from 2012, I didn't listen to this week. I don't even really remember it. I'm sure there's songs on it I heard because I assume they were played on the radio. But yeah, they have their early, those two albums that were really ska. This album that sort of brought in those all other elements, like the new wave elements, the pop elements, which they lean more into in the future. But you still had Return. It's not like Return of Saturn was the next album, so it wasn't like they went right to rock steady.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, to answer the question, I'll go first. It's kind of what we've been saying throughout this episode. But I kind of have a weird answer for this. So if like you're like my age or like you grew up in the 90s were a very influential decade on you, I would say, yes, this album is without a doubt essential. I mean, it was everywhere at the time. You probably already know that. So I think it is an important album for the band. It is their best album, in my opinion. But the weird thing is, as we've discussed throughout this whole podcast, is with No Doubt, their strength is in their singles. So if you were younger, or maybe you don't know No Doubt very well, and you wanted to dedicate an hour of your time, I would recommend like their singles collection from like 92 to 2003, because that's got everything that everybody talks about or knows about, and it gives you like you got, was it Trapped in a Box, you got songs from their first album, you have most of the songs are from this album, and then you got the stuff that comes after, including new. So for me, that's where I see the biggest the best way you can spend your time listening to No Doubt, if you had to pick one album to do it. How do you guys feel?
Well, I think, dude, the greatest hits argument is always kind of, it's more of an overview. But I understand for a band like No Doubt how it works. But I think on this album there are good enough tracks that makes it a solid album. So, but yeah, I understand if a greatest hits or a singles collection is kind of the way to go when it goes to No Doubt. And I think that for me the singles are just strong on this.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like, there's enough singles, that this, like, if you were introducing, I always think of it like introducing a student to No Doubt. But there's enough singles on this, I think, that they would like hear something they would recognize, especially with all the stuff bringing back, into movies and stuff throughout the years. So I would say it's essential. I would say it's essential because of the impact it had, like, culturally, kind of like, but and more importantly, the playfulness in the music. Whereas before that, there was a lot of that seriousness, and I was still there when No Doubt came along, so it didn't really appeal to me until later. But I think that was an important shift in music, right before indie rock and the radio took over. We shouldn't be taking stuff too seriously all the time.
Yeah, I like to work off of what Ryan was saying. I say it's essential for like similar reasons, and for me, it was also a time when No Doubt came out, was when they were talking about those 80s bands. Because like when, Nirvana, getting into them, they talked about bands like the Pixies and that sort of lens on the 80s, but this was more of the commercial stuff. This is where you heard them talking about, Blondie, like, or Duran Duran, or Talk Talk, or, just sort of the more quintessential 80s stuff, the more pop stuff that was going on. And it introduced me to ska music. I didn't know what ska was. So I learned who the Specials were. They had the dude in their video. You kind of learn that ska predated reggae, and reggae, you started learning about the stuff you thought you knew about. It's teaching me new stuff in music. So yeah, it's essential for that. And just what Ryan said, the influence going forward, like Gwen Stefani is now pretty much an icon. And it's purely stemmed from, it all originates from this album. Like, she had hits individually after this, but her best song is probably Don't Speak. Like, what's bigger? Maybe Hollaback Girl.
Yeah.
I don't think that one has the same staying power.
Yeah, exactly. When it goes to it as like a written song, it's this. And
you can't really cover Hollaback Girl.
No.
You can cover Don't Speak.
Yeah.
But like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, just, I don't know, just great album. And it was, at the time when I bought it, it stood out in my collection. And even today, with all the types of, as eclectic as my music taste is, this one is still very different than a lot of the other stuff I actually own. Because a lot of the stuff that kind of influenced off of this, or got a lens on it because of No Doubt, was only just like singles. Like, Real Big Fish was getting played on the radio, but I never bought a Real Big Fish album, me personally.
Yeah.
So, or any other ska. Like, I don't own a ska album, but I own this.
Yeah, so it still sticks out. It's the cultural impact you can see easier than the, the musical influence.
Yeah, because it's easy to be like, I know a lot of the albums we talk about will be like, oh, like this type of music was big at the time, and this is a really good album in that genre. Whereas this was like, it kind of did its own thing. It changed stuff sort of, but not musically. It's still kind of different than everything that came after it, but it did affect mainstream in a big way.
So this is a win, like a 3-0. Is it the first unanimous Breed Essential album? I don't know. I'm not keeping score here.
We should run some stats. I think we've had some before.
Check out the score.
But this is like a 90s. This is like a 90s. So it's like, I don't know. It feels like to not say it's essential based on how like we grew up, how it was everywhere for us, how we saw it and kind of digested it. I mean, for me to not say it's an essential album would almost be wrong. And
it's where Gwen Stefani came from, and she's still going strong, still impacting pop culture. So like, you got, if you want an explanation for where all this started, you got to go back.
Because I remember a big thing for me, like growing up, you'd hear a song on the radio from an artist and you're like, why is, I don't know, Phil Collins always on the radio? You know what I mean? You just don't know the backstory of these artists. And for Gwen Stefani, it's like such a huge piece of backstory that I'm sure most people know who No Doubt is, but
And I feel like if you had like a young fan of Gwen Stefani and they didn't know about this album, it would be such a great opportunity to be like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's still like, as much as I said, like Just a Girl is a bit dated to me, the rest, like the album is solid. Like Just a Girl is only really dated because of it being part of the culture, like it was so big part of the culture that it's blurred lines for me, that it's just sort of so ingrained with that era. But the album still holds good. Like it's still good.
Sure. A good balance of weirdness and just great hooks you could sing.
Something that would be interesting for me is like if you have like a kid or somebody who doesn't know who No Doubt is, it'd be fun just to play them Just a Girl, just to see their reaction. Because I remember my reaction when I first heard it. You're like, this is a hit. The song sounds amazing. So just to see if they get the same reaction, I think they would. Like if it's a hit, right? Like it works all the time.
Well, like
not necessarily, man. Culture changes.
I kind of when I was talking about when I first got the album, I sort of mentioned it, how I got it on Columbia House at the same time I got Rage Against the Machine, which is sort of like, it goes to show you like how different it was from what else I was listening to at the time, but I was still open to it and I still enjoyed it. Like I was ordering Rage and Pearl Jam and Silverchair and No Doubt. Like I was ordering.
They were that bridging band to the pop world in a lot of ways. Like they don't speak slow dance. That was getting played on Energy, pretty sure. Energy 108 pop station when we were kids.
Yeah, the top 40 station.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, that's all I got. You guys have any final thoughts, or is that it?
The win.
Nice.
Listen to Tragic Kingdom.
Good one.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Essential Albums podcast. That one was recorded in February. Next week, get rich or die trying as the crew covers Curtis James Jackson III, also known as 50 Cent. Watch out for new episodes. You can find us on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And give us a follow on Instagram at the Essential Albums Podcast. Original music by Ryan Dugal and artwork by Vincent Tran.